Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to our Bible study. This morning is Saturday, June 16th, 2018, and we are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And this morning, our moderator is Chardell from Pennsylvania. Go ahead.
Good morning. We have our quote, which is from Retrospection and Introspection by Mary Baker Eddy, page 84. Quote, "It must not be forgotten that in times past, arrogant ignorance and pride in attempting to steady the ark of truth have dimmed the power and glory of the Scriptures, to which this Christian Science textbook is the key." End quote. And then we have from Miscellaneous Writings, also by Mary Baker Eddy, page 31. Quote, "God, good, has all power." End quote. And our topic for today is God, the only power.
Thank you. How does that work, where arrogant ignorance and pride would try to attempt to steady the ark of truth, and then dimming the power and glory of the Scriptures? What's an example? How does that work?
I think what I've found is when the intellectual mind gets in and tries to explain the Bible and gets into the material or human descriptions and kind of almost diminishes the power or dismisses the stories or disclaims them or explains them without spiritual understanding.
That's excellent. Anyone else?
Seems like it's an ever-present trait of mortal mind to want to regulate and control. I guess similar to what Linda said, I just envisioned somebody saying, this is what it means, therefore you have to believe it this way, instead of letting God speak to the person. Let God speak to the heart.
Thank you.
I do know, I saw a documentary, and I just think it should be interesting for people to note when they do the Bible studies, is that there was a concerted effort of certain individuals to get into the universities and do research on the Bible with the attempt to actually make the Bible, diminish it. And so there's an actual desire to go out there to disprove it. And some of the stuff that's under the name of Bible studies is actually in the guise of trying to darken your thought. So that's why you really need spiritual sense when you do this.
Yeah, so that speaks to all these parents who strive really hard to get their children into a great Ivy League school, and don't give a darn about their spiritual growth, right?
Yes,
I think
exactly true.
the great irony of the Ivy League schools, they all started out as seminaries, where everyone was studying the Bible and Greek and Hebrew and Latin.
Oh, that's right. This country was founded by Christians, by the pioneers who came here because they wanted to worship God in a better way because they were being hampered in Europe. So they were thrilled to have the freedom to worship God, to read the Bible, and it was emblazoned on their foreheads.
Yeah, that's very true. On the newspaper that Elsie sends us at 4th of July, the Alabama paper, has a lot of quotes from the early days of our country and quotes from Yale and Harvard, and how in order to get into those schools you had to know the Bible, you had to study the Bible. It was all about the Bible. And so this is a very serious trend. And I will say, I feel it, that, that our children are suffering because of this lack of God in their lives. And, when can't get the attention one way, and they'll try it, the attention another way. And certainly with our children, it would seem to be a way to get the attention of parents, but they're still looking in wrong directions for the answers. The answer is in having an understanding of God and your purpose in life, who and what you are.
And yet we get amazed and astounded as all these dishonesty and all these crime and things that are going on, and it's the result of not reading the Bible or studying or taking religion away from not religion but knowing God from the schools. And then this is what it creates. So, we should not be too astounded or surprised that this is happening, because this has been coming on for a while now.
Yes, thank you.
We should not be astounded or surprised. We should not stand aghast at nothingness, but we should handle the error that is at work. Because the error is diligently at work. That's why a lot of people are homeschooling their children, because the schools can't do it right in most cases, because they're prevented. It's illegal now for them to do it right. So we need to start all over.
Thank you for mentioning
the children.
Sorry?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say how valuable to our nation is the Bible, when our Constitution, the precepts in our Constitution were taken from the Bible, from the ideas and the precepts.
Yeah, the Bible is valuable because it is the Word of God passed down through history. It's the most valuable book we have as a race.
So I think what we are doing is to declare the power and the glory of the Scriptures, to brighten it and to declare it, and to render null and void this other stuff that's going on.
Which is mere ignorance and pride. It's a false sense of what is true.
Who is trying to speak?
I was. I think if the Bible is not presented with humbly trying to live it and as an example, then it really is giving a wrong view of what it is, the importance of its message. And therefore, people might say, what if this is what the Bible teaches, then what am I going to follow it for? So the example of what we're saying about the Bible must be clear. In the churches, some things go on that are quite contrary to what the Bible is saying. So it's not, we can have the Bible, but I feel that it's with science and health together that the right understanding and the humble example of what its message is can be shown so people can follow.
And you're not just taking a book, the Bible, away. You're taking God away. That's the basis of it. It's God. And they try to maybe make it sound like, the Bible is another book. It's not. It's God.
right.
It's God speaking to us and working in our lives.
The Word of God.
Right.
And it's being written down and passed down through the ages. Because when it happened at the time, somebody recognized that it was so important that it had to be recorded.
And that is one of the attempts to undermine it, is to quote it and not live it, or quote things that don't make sense to people or sound hateful or take it out of context. That's part of the overall attempt to discredit it. And we must be wise to that and be the right example, as Florence was saying, and also to bring out the right interpretation so people can understand it and not be turned off by it.
That's why Mrs. Eddy made it the first tenet. The inspired word of the Bible is our sufficient guide to eternal life.
Thank you.
Right. Studying the Bible is not an intellectual exercise. As Florence said, if you approach the study of the Bible as an intellectual exercise, what's the point? Who cares? That's not what it's for. And that's not what life is all about. That's why our Bible studies are so much fun. They get to the point.
Before coming here, I really wanted to learn about the Bible, and so I got two groups of audios, one for the Old Testament, one for the New Testament. They were books on tape, I think through the Great Lectures on Tape or Great Books on Tape. They were by professors that were, specialized in the Bible. And I really couldn't listen to it because it was very intellectual, and I wasn't really learning. It just wasn't teaching me anything, so I couldn't really even learn anything. But it was a very literal interpretation of the Bible, and I was really disappointed. So I was very happy to find this church and gain this spiritual interpretation, because it's really exciting, and I learn a lot. So I wanted to mention that.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I know I did a little of that myself. I ended up having to really literally throw out that in those days it was taped, but they were just so unhelpful. I couldn't even give them to anybody.
Yeah.
They were intellectual, not at all helpful.
I wouldn't want to give them to anybody.
No, you
Because
wouldn't.
they're not a help. That would lead you in the wrong direction, and I'm surprised that they're even selling them. I mean, they were a lot of money. I can't remember now how much, but it was a couple $100 at least, and probably more. But I didn't find it helpful.
Well, there are a lot of people out there who are hungering and thirsting, who suspect that there's something good in the Bible, and they're searching. So they'll spend the money till they find what helps them.
And that addresses the arrogant ignorance and pride that goes on. It is arrogant because it thinks it knows something when it doesn't. And so they'll stay humble on the topic. Okay, Shardy, anyone else, or should we go on?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to say quick that there's only the Bible. There's a lot of books that say the Bible, but the message, for example, is not the Bible.
That's deception.
Shall I go ahead with question number 1?
Sure.
Can I mention one other thing really quick? I feel also, as Mrs. Eddy says, desire is prayer. And if you really want to learn the Bible, you will find a way, to find it. And I think that was part of, I was so excited to find the church and the Bible study, but I did keep looking.
Yeah, you persisted, and God answered your prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Definitely.
That's a good note to leave this on. If you desire it with all your heart and soul, God will lead you to what you will find inspired and helpful.
Right.
Okay, Shardy.
All right. Question number 1. What are the words that describe God's power in 1 Chronicles 29, 11 to 13?
If someone would read that for us, please.
I'll read it.
Right.
Thine, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. For all that is in the heaven and in the earth is thine. Thine is the kingdom, O Lord, and thou art exalted as head above all.
Thank you.
Well, you haven't finished.
Maybe for this part.
Sorry, you want me to read all of it?
Well, there's a lot more words.
I'm sorry.
Or aren't there?
I'm sorry. Both riches and honor come of thee, and thou reignest over all. And in thy hand is power and might. And in thine hand it is to make great and to give strength unto all. Now therefore, our God, we thank thee and praise thy glorious name.
Okay, that's good.
His greatness, power, honor, glory, majesty, riches, grace, might.
Exalted.
Yeah. Both riches and honor come from God's power. There's no other way to riches or honor.
And you think of how so many people try for riches and honor through other ways, and sadly it ends up not well. Always has to be. You can't be searching. That can't be your goal for riches and honor. That's a byproduct of. It can be, not always, but it can be a byproduct, as it was in the case of Daniel and Joseph and some of the early prophets, Abraham and others. I mean, Mrs. Eddy eventually got riches and honor, but certainly she did not seek that.
I think that's why it says seek him first, and all these things will be added unto you.
Thank you. Yeah, God's power is great. He owns the kingdom.
It's pretty wonderful to me that Christian Science shows us how to, if we're living rightly, we can reflect all this stuff, but we can't just like grab the effect on its own. We have to, go for the cause.
Exactly. You can't steal it. Also, he reigns over all.
And all belongs to him.
Yeah. So it's the only true government. It's the only thing that deserves our obedience.
Important to know today, it's the only government for our nation and every nation. All of this, to dwell on it, to think about it, this is establishing the omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience of God. And it's so important to start your day with it, feeling it, knowing it.
I also like the idea of spirit is our substance, and it's plenteous, and we have all we really need, so we're really rich, because spirit is our substance, and, if we listen to God, and, are confident, we'll have everything that we need.
Yeah, and that is the power of God, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it is the source of our strength.
Yeah, and those are words that describe power: force, strength, energy, ability, influence, and right of government. And Christ is called the power of God because through him God displays his power and authority. And greatness is chief, vast, power and excellence, extensive, rich, victory, conquest, defeat of an enemy, glory, brightness, luster, splendor, majesty, dignity, inspiring awe. So, what is it when you believe in another power?
Well, that would be lack. Lack of love, lack of supply, lack of spirit, lack of, truth.
Absolutely.
Or
it's lack of faith in the one God.
Yeah.
It's
having another God.
It's disobedience of the first commandment. And at one point in my life, I realized when I believed there was another power, and if I feared something, that meant I believed there was another power, and therefore I was worshiping what?
Satan, the devil.
Yeah, which doesn't really exist. But in my thought, I was giving it life and thinking it did by fearing it, and in some instances even obeying it. Well, yeah, and probably in every instance. And because of that, I suffered. Because I was disobeying all of the commands of God to acknowledge one God over all and in all. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. That's why this point is so important and essential as a scientist. I went through my life calling myself a scientist, and yet when I was so afraid of so many things, how could I really be a scientist? You really know there's only one power. Ultimately, there is nothing to be afraid of. And you are giving whatever power it is you're afraid of its life by believing in it.
And the world will tell you that it's real. It's okay to fear it. But God says it's not real because it's not of me. Therefore, fear not.
I think this is what the article I referred to on Wednesday was talking about on a carousel about courage. If we are not knowing God's allness, then we are really resisting it. And why should we suffer if we are resisting it?
That's so good. That's such a good point, Florence. There's no such thing as neutrality. You're either on the right side or the wrong side.
And you can't really go over this point enough. As I've said many times in Mrs. Eddy's home, they did a watch every morning to handle fear, which would be a belief in a power apart from God. Every morning they did it. Because we get bombarded with this belief that there is another power, and it does seem to have some kind of power to it. But if you really analyze it and strip it bare and look at it under the microscope of spirit and truth and love, it shrinks into its nothingness. Error is a coward before truth. So make sure you're challenging any troubles you have in your life. Challenge it with the all power, all might, all presence of God. How can it exist if that's the truth? And it is the truth. Because the Bible tells us so.
Well, and it's been proven over and over and over again.
I think these troubles come and then they like form a layer between us and our God, the feeling of his love. And he says that the only thing that separates us is the false belief, really. And then we feel separated from his love.
Yes.
Yep.
What I
Go ahead.
what I like about the Science and Health by Mary Baker Eddy is the key to the scriptures is that she lets us know that all those great things that happened in the Bible weren't just in that time, not just for that time only, but for all time. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And to go back to Florence's point, the whole point of the Bible is to show us how to live our lives. And if we will take it that way, it's the greatest blessing there could possibly be.
And I was thinking with gratitude for Mrs. Eddy, the fact that she gave us the idea of studying a lesson every day and having that time to commune and talk to God every morning to establish his allness, all presence, and all power. Because it needs, as I said, it needs to be done every day. You can't just do it occasionally and then think you're okay. You've got to keep at it. Keep restoring your soul, so to speak.
Keep going back to the fountain.
Yeah, going back to the source.
And it really is showing us the way to our true freedom, peace, more peace.
And if you do these things, then these great big problems don't have to ever materialize. Go ahead.
I just love the Bible lessons, how Mrs. Eddy set that up. To me, that is that structure of truth and love. And that is the church, that it's not necessarily a physical or human structure, but it's that beautiful spiritual structure, and we're guided each week because we just can't do it on our own. I mean, the human tendency is to think, oh, I can read the Bible on my own. I can read Science and Health. I can do it. I can wing it. I know I can do this.
And then, no, you're so right, Suzanne. That's absolutely right. I don't know how many times people have told me that.
I used to think it myself. That didn't work.
No, and now you can consider it a sign of drifting. People sometimes don't want to hear that, and they think, well, maybe there are too many rules and laws and stuff, but it's a discipline, but it's only for your benefit. And when you really love it, it's no longer just some enforced rule you have to do. It's something you can't do without, right?
Right.
Exactly.
It actually makes you feel more secure, to pray and to think about the tenets of the church and the daily duties. It just gives you that security.
Yes. I read in one of Bicknell Young's articles this week where he says to take a statement every day, or at least every week, but every day from the lesson and write it down and work with it during the day. And that's exactly what Mrs. Evans used to instruct us to do, which shows that these truths, they are true and they exist. And I don't believe she ever read that. Maybe she did, but I doubt it. I think it just came to her to do it. Maybe her practitioner told her. But it's a wonderful thing to do. That's how I say you build your arsenal. You have all these little written things to think about during the day, whether it's from Science and Health or the Bible. And also, some of you have been taking thoughts from the watch messages and doing the same thing, doing as someone called them mini watches during the day. Just keep it in your pocket and you have it there. I have a whole box full of quotes and things I've written on little pieces of paper. And after they come out of my pocket, they go into the box. Yeah, Gary does.
A whole drawer full of them.
A whole drawer of them. It's wonderful. They're like your companions. Brave companions such as these, but wonderful companions to keep with you during the day. Well, we probably should move on.
Okay. Question number 2. What did the children of Israel witness of God's power? In Exodus 15:1, and then 9 to 13.
Who would like to read it?
I can read it.
Okay, thank you.
Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. Thou didst blow with thy wind, the sea covered them. They sank as lead in the mighty waters. Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee? Glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders. Thou stretchest out thy right hand, the earth swallowed them. Thou in thy mercy hast led forth the people which thou hast redeemed. Thou hast guided them in thy strength unto thy holy habitation.
Thank you.
Helena?
Well, the children of Israel certainly had everything they needed to trust God from that point forward. I know when I look back at the last 5 years, there's no way I can't trust God today, and I'm sure they felt that themselves.
And what have they witnessed?
Well, one thing they witnessed was the crossing of the Red Sea, where there was an opening in the sea, and the waters stood a wall on either side. This is an historical event, not just a story. So this is like visible proof that God is the only power. I'm so thankful for this historical event that was recorded, because it wasn't just the brute force of a wind, it was the power of Almighty God that stood the water up.
On both sides.
On both sides. That's not how water behaves typically. No,
that's not how the wind blows typically either.
It's not. I mean, it's said that gravitational is a force, and the gravitation is universal. Well, this kind of debunks that idea. There's one universal force, and it is the power of God good. This event proved it.
I think that's why the statement, who is like unto thee, to me sums it all up. The recognition of his almightiness. No other power.
Yeah.
And you see in this what a bully Sarah was. And doesn't the enemy say to you these things? I will pursue you. I will overtake you. I will divide the spoil. My lust, all the terrible things will land upon you. I will draw my sword and I will destroy you. Isn't that what Erotalk says to you? The big bully? And that's why you have to be fortified with the almighty power of God. What cannot God do? But it is a big bully. See it as a big bully. Punch it in the face.
I was thinking about how important it is in our study that we stick with this, that we do go to God first thing in the morning, and that we do put our armor on. Because look at what the Israelites saw happen. Look at the power of God, and yet they still struggled on and on in their false beliefs along the way.
Yes, it's this tendency of mortal mind to forget it all and to just go on to the next problem. And I know, Florence, and I see it in the practice, sometimes people don't even take a moment to thank God for the healing they just had. They're on to the next problem. It's unbelievable sometimes. But that is the human mind. If you are ever not grateful, well, you know right away you're not in the right mind, and you better do whatever it takes to get out of that mind. It's a clear indication. Think of what happened, and yet they still doubted. It didn't matter. That's why when people say, oh, if we only had these instantaneous healings, then I would believe. Well, yes to that. I mean, look at all the examples of these wonderful things. I thought it was just terrible what's going on. That's it. The human mind never gets it, so don't even try to appease it. It will not get it. You have to be in the right mind to see it and understand it. Be grateful for it. It's just not going to happen. Believe me, I've watched and waited for years. It's not happening. You're in the wrong mind, you just won't get it. Even if the Red Sea parts for you, half an hour later you'll be complaining about something else. Or
it's also
go ahead.
I feel that it's also lack of appreciation for the power behind even the simplest truth that we learn, because it says that even the simplest truth, if you have faith in it, is bigger than all the trouble or the aggressive suggestions that are coming. So at least be prepared in honor of God's power in the word that you say. At least say it, or declare it, or something. Do something with it.
Yes. And make it your own, and share it with others when it becomes real. And that's why this repeating it over and over, they're repeating what happened to remind them, those who were awake and grateful, repeat it over and over, the wonderful glories, the wonderful demonstrations that have been and that you're so grateful for. I remember doing that just this past week, and you just get this warm glow comes over you. And I could even remember how I felt when the healings come. When the healings really come, and you feel God's presence and power, there is a warm glow. There isn't this sense of, oh gosh, maybe it's going to happen again. It's just a great sense of God's presence and power.
And also, I feel like at that moment, there's such a great sense of love.
Yes, because
when
love
it,
is the power.
Yeah. It's just within. Yeah. And you almost, in a way, don't want to talk about it at that moment. You're just so appreciative, and feel that love. You don't really have to tell somebody.
No, that's very true. It's better not to. Better just be quiet and make it yours. And otherwise, that's not a good idea to talk about it. Not at first. Eventually, though, in a testimony meeting, yes, eventually.
You have to help someone else with it.
Yeah. I was also impressed with the magnitude of how many people crossed the Red Sea. So I guess it was 600 plus their wives and children. So it was like 2,400,000 people. It wasn't like just a couple of people trying to get across, And then, God took the chariot wheels off the Egyptians, and, so maybe they seemed coming fast and powerful, but God's will is always the final word.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
No, they all went across on dry ground.
Yeah.
And as soon as the last person made it, and as soon as the Egyptian army tried to cross onto the dry ground, the sea came back and destroyed them.
So never fear that your enemies won't be destroyed. And I'm talking about the enemies, of the erroneous thinking or the depression or the whatever, the physical ailments, the whatever it is. Those are the enemies that get totally destroyed. That's all they can do is destroy themselves.
It goes back to the victory aspect, the one word for God's power. With God, there's victory over the passions, temptation, things that would want to hold us to earth. But by God's power, we can be elevated above them and rise above them and see the victory of God.
Yes, and we can be confident that divine justice is more swift and more powerful and more complete than any human justice we could ever think of.
Yes, I love that Mrs. Eddy said that injustice doesn't have a type of the power that the justice of God has, because that's the only justice. Just keep knowing it, quietly knowing it.
I think it helps me to know that my goal is not to have human comfort, because if that's what then the mortal mind tries to come in and say, well, you're really thirsty, and then you start to squabble, and it's different. I think that it's a spiritual view, and know that God is here and taking care of me and all, and what do I need to see about this? What am I seeing wrongly right now?
Not a pure desire, no.
Yeah, and really, when you think of it, is there really any human comfort? That's a mistaken sense.
Pretense of it, yeah.
Yeah. Just like there's no human love, it's not real love, it's not real comfort. Usually it's peace when there is no peace. That's human comfort.
I mean, it is right to seek peace and harmony, isn't it?
So the real one.
Yeah, it is right to seek that. But the question is, where are you going to seek it? And how are you seeking it? And what is your motive behind living in the first place?
And when you seek it divinely, you're going to ruffle up mortal mind. It's not going to be, Mrs. Eddy says that, doesn't she? Science and Health, about the waters of mortal mind, are agitated.
Humanly, it will be uncomfortable, but spiritually, you will be at peace with yourself because you will be at peace with God.
And many of you are...
As many of you already know.
Yeah, and are doing this now. Not everyone will approve of what you're doing, but that doesn't mean you stop doing it. Anyone else on this one?
Okay, Charlie.
All right, number 3. What is being revealed when Jesus took Peter, John, and James with him up to the mountain in Luke 9:28-42?
Okay, who will read that?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
And it came to pass about 8 days after these sayings, he took Peter and John and James and went up into a mountain to pray. And as he prayed, the fashion of his countenance was altered, and his raiment was white and glistering. And behold, there talked with him 2 men, which were Moses and Elias, who appeared in glory, and spake of his decease, which he should accomplish at Jerusalem. But Peter and they that were with him were heavy with sleep. And when they were awake, they saw his glory, and the 2 men that stood with him. And it came to pass, as they departed from him, Peter said unto Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here, and let us make 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias, not knowing what he said. While he thus spake, there came a cloud, and overshadowed them, and they feared as they entered into the cloud. And there came a voice out of the cloud, saying, This is my beloved Son, hear him. And when the voice was past, Jesus was found alone, and they kept it close, and told no man in those days any of the things which they had seen. And it came to pass that on the next... That's good? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's enough.
I think that
Thank you, Jeremy.
satisfies. Yeah.
Any comments on that?
I was thinking when the fashion of his countenance was altered and his raiment was white and glistering, it was as though they were seeing beyond the personal sense of Jesus to his actual, real individuality.
Yes, his indestructible individuality as well as Moses and Elias. It's quite a story. And then what are the disciples doing?
They zoned out. Sleeping.
Sleeping. Yes, sleeping.
How is the Word of God described when God's presence is so close in the Bible? When something powerful is happening and God's presence is being felt, how is it described in the Bible? Okay, it's often described as light, isn't it?
Light.
There's the light of understanding, but it's euphemistic for the bright light that appears. It appeared to Moses as a burning bush. So it often comes as light. And here was a very bright light. And not only did it shine on Jesus, but it shone out of him, which shows how close he was to God.
Yeah, it shows what his praying. He was praying when this happened. Matthew Henry says, by prayer we fetch in the wisdom, grace, and joy which make the face to shine. But in Jesus' case, it was quite something. And one of the commentators mentioned, what a comforting thing. They felt maybe he was speaking because the crucifixion and resurrection were coming up. And that was such proof of there is no death and the divine glory.
But here Moses and Elijah had come to comfort him.
Yes.
And to encourage him.
Yes, I'm sure that was it.
Because he was not getting comfort or encouragement from anybody.
No.
Certainly not from his
Sleeping a lot.
So that would help him through what he was going to have to go through. Know that man is not material. He is spiritual. There's absolute proof of it. And then when they finally woke up, they humanize the whole thing and want to make tabernacles.
woke up and didn't even know what he was saying. Just came out.
No.
I love how right after that, God comes over and says, "Listen, hear my son." Just kind of shut the whole thing down. That was so profound.
All this didn't happen so that you could speak, Peter.
But wasn't this another proof, evidence that life is eternal? I mean, here was Moses and Elijah. You know, they'd been dead for hundreds of years, thousands of years. It also showed the golden thread of the Christ. That the Christ has come to mankind in one form or another throughout history. I mean, it fully represented itself in Jesus, the Christ. But Elijah caught the Christ truth. Moses caught the Christ truth. Others have caught it. And that's evidence that it's available for part of all of us.
And you see, this brings us with much greater depth of understanding about why we live and what our life is, and there is no end to it. Because many people don't understand this at all. They either think if you pass on, you go into nothingness, or either go to heaven or hell, or they don't really understand. And it's a great comfort to understand. It also would take away any temptation for suicide, because we know there's probation after death for people who need it, and you don't enter into some wonderful state.
I think that's really important, because in the situation where there was a suicide in my son's friends group, that was one of the things that concerned me that was voiced, was this continual suggestion that, well, now he's in a better place.
Yes.
And it was very...
Yeah, and he's not.
I think naturally everyone believes that. Otherwise, a lot of people would just do it right now. So everyone knows that it's not the key to better things.
Yeah, I think that is true, because that's true. We'd all just shoot ourselves if we all thought it was going to be heaven right away, instantaneous. So,
or the opposite. People say, well, you know, life is short, so let's party.
These are things that we need to know. They're things that our children need to know. You know, we didn't get it. We had a watch on Thursday about suicides, and we didn't get into it so deeply, but these are the deeper issues, because it's come to my attention that children, some children, if they don't get their way, they say, I'm going to kill them, I'm going to kill myself. And so then their parents give them their credit card or other things like that, which is absurd, of course, but they're terrified about it. And so we need to understand these deeper issues so we don't allow our children to manipulate, in some instances, to that extent. They don't even know what they're doing.
And the worst thing we can do is to enable that kind of thinking and behavior.
Yeah.
You know, this put me in mind, this is a little bit, maybe a little bit off, but when I was a teenager, I became looking at movies and whatever. And so at one point I remember I told my mother, that I wanted to kill myself. And she looked at me and she said, well, let me know when you want to do it and I'll give you the poison. I'll put the poison there yourself. And I look at her shocked.
Because I was expecting some sympathy or some kind of...
Well, that stopped you, right? That cut it right off.
You know, it really did. After that, I said, oh, hell, she doesn't even care about it. Well, this is my mom, so I'm not going to impress anybody. It was a little crude way of doing it, but it sure cured me.
Well, I have to say, and people
Thank
get
you.
shocked by this, yes, thank you for sharing that. It cured you right away.
That's right. Cut it off.
Occasionally with Mrs. Evans would get people saying they wanted to kill themselves, especially when she was coming in on an error. Rather than face the error, I want to kill myself. And she would say, go ahead, go right ahead and do it.
See how it works out for you.
See how it works out. And it seems kind of shocking. But, you know, when it's used as manipulation, and what will happen? You will wake up and find out you still have the same problems. So you can't be afraid of anything in science, not even that. People are terrified of that and that threat. And I can understand it, and I certainly don't mean to be unsympathetic. There were 2 suicides in my side of the family, and so I have a lot of sympathy, or maybe not sympathy, I should say compassion. But it needs to be faced and dealt with like any other error, and not run from or not terrified of. God always has the right answer, whatever that answer is. So thank you for sharing that, Philip.
I saw a church sign yesterday. It said suicide is the permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I thought that was it's just a temporary problem. Work it out. I thought that was just a great way to put it.
True, yes, people can work it out here. You either work it out here or hereafter, so why not work it out here? And we're also told most people who really are going to commit suicide don't talk about it. They don't announce it and tell everybody. They just do it. So anyway. And then some of you have had experiences with it where you wanted to. And even tried it. Didn't work out. But anyway, maybe that's another discussion. So, because we're running short on time, Shardy, I don't...
Can I just say
One more question?
one quick thing, maybe really fast? On the flip side of that, when you get a new thought, a spiritual thought, it illumines your whole being, and I think sometimes, you just light up. And so when I was reading this question, this passage, I thought of that. Like I've, experienced that here and with other people. And you see sort of a lighting up of someone when they have a new idea. Okay, I'll let you go.
Well, before we go, one thing that really hit me when I was working on this question was that we go to the Mount with the Christ, but we must come down and do the work like he did. And that was and it'll be talked about later, about when he came down, there was lots of work to do, and the Christ did it. Okay.
Thank you very much. That's a very important point. Yeah, very good. Can't just stay up there. You got to come down and get back to work.
Number 4, who receives the power of the Lord? Psalm 24, 1-5.
Okay, someone can read that.
Okay, I'll read it. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas, and established it upon the floods. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord, or who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. He shall receive the blessing from the Lord, and righteousness from the God of his salvation.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Clean hands. What does it mean to have clean hands?
Well, on my forum, I wrote that I can't have spent the day trying to build up idols or attempting to break down the works of God, or even spent time holding my hands up with indifference to the needs of my fellow man. So I just think that thought of clean hands is really an important thing. And I think you know whether you're guilty about something or not.
Yeah, no, that's it.
That's it. Whether you've been obedient to the commands of God or not.
You do know. And Mrs. Eddy says, what is a guilty conscience is what?
Well, I know it's one of the worst things.
Yeah, it is one of the
It
worst.
keeps you from being able to do what you need to do.
That's right. It does.
Torturous thing is the cumulative effects of a guilty conscience. Keeps
Thank
piling
you.
on until you clear it out.
Yep.
And you can clear it out. You don't have to live that way. That's Saul became Paul was proof of that. Has to be done, though. Otherwise, it renders you ineffective. You always have that guilty conscience. So it's clean hands. Good to have. That's why every night before you go to bed, clean your slate. Make sure you're not hating anybody or gossiping or anything you shouldn't be doing. But obedient before the Father. Okay, next one.
And a pure heart. Only right motives. I don't know. I wrote only right motives will enable me to find the trail that leads up to that holy place on the mountain.
Can you have a pure heart if you're full of pride?
No.
Can you have a pure heart if you have only a little bit of pride?
No.
No.
Get a little bit pregnant.
Exactly.
I read something that I liked in Matthew Henry's commentary that man should not have pride in his works or envy others' works, as it is God doing all, God working through man.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had a Bible study once on blessed are the pure in heart, or maybe it's a round table, for they shall see God. Can't see God. It requires that purity, spirituality, a lack of materiality, a developed spiritual sense. All of that is purity. And if you are prideful or jealous or some of the things that were just mentioned, it will cloud that. You won't be able to see God. So we keep our windows pure and clear and clean so we can see clearly the truth. Anyone else on that, Lauren?
Okay, we got a couple more to go before we're finished. What's next?
Who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity?
Right.
I just
that all
took that as I can't seek the summit simply because I might look righteous to others.
Heaven forbid you look righteous.
Well, I think as a child in California, we would go to different Christian churches out there, and I just would feel there were a lot of fake people there, and I was really young, so I don't know where that idea of fake people came to like a 6-year-old, but there was just something off about the whole thing. So.
Well, children can often tell better than adults.
It's true. But people get turned off by Christianity and, as far as I'm saying, and the Bible by those who aren't good examples of it. Definition of vanity: empty, worthless, fruitless, proud, showy, not effectual.
So is your love unselfed or selfed? So that he says an unselfed love is one of the requirements. Being able to heal. Okay, we got one more.
Well, anyone
Yeah,
else
more
on
on
that?
that one.
We don't want to just ask anyone else, or people have something to say.
Well, one of the things I just wanted to add is when you sometimes read these commentaries, it seems like to create a pure heart and clean hands. I mean, that's what I love about Plainfield is you give us very practical ways to do that. So I was thinking about the statement where Mrs. Eddy says, we cannot turn from the body too soon to find, I think, disease and mortal mind, and to find its cure and working for God. And that was very comforting to me this time, thinking about that working in God is a way towards this righteousness, that you don't have to be perfect, but you're working it out. But working through God is the answer.
Absolutely.
Yep, that's for sure. If we were all perfect, we would have ascended by now.
Our clothes would be a lot whiter.
so bright you wouldn't be able to see them.
No stains.
Okay. One more.
Nor sworn deceitfully. But this was, to me, the thought that I can't be saying I'm here to do God's will and then fill my day with a bunch of nonsense like hating and fearing and lying and anything else.
What does Mrs. Eddy say about honesty?
Spiritual
Power.
And dishonesty?
Human weakness.
Or forces divine help.
Exactly.
This whole idea of swearing deceitfully gives me a picture somebody puts on an image of pure in heart, but it really isn't. Like they're very proud of their purity. The following.
Right.
It's foolish because God knows every heart, so you're fooling yourself, really.
Matthew.
And Jesus had the strongest rebukes for the hypocrites who say one thing and do something else. Very, very damaging to yourself and to others. Certainly to your family. Who is speaking?
Yeah, Matthew Henry had some good comments with the word covenant. He said, that is a pure heart, which is sincere and without guile in covenanting with God, which is carefully guarded, that the wicked one, the unclean spirit, touch it not, which is purified by faith and conformed to the image and will of God. They are such as deal honestly both with God and man, in their covenant with God and their contracts with men. They have not sworn deceitfully, nor broken their promises, violated their engagements, nor taken any false oath.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Very good. This may be a good ending. You could put that on the form, Suzanne, if you have it.
Okay.
It's our covenant with God, and we must never break it.
For our sakes.
Yes, for our sake. Anything, Shari, you want to add anything?
No, this is beautiful. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shari.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Shardy.
Thank you. See you.